You're on air.
Awesome. I'd like to welcome everybody to the February 1st, 2022 work session. Our first item tonight is community engagement update, which will be presented by our community engagement coordinator, Jason Watts.
I'm actually going to interrupt. And sorry, I'm Kelly Brooks. I'm the assistant city manager. And I said that I would do a little overview before we kicked off these next two items. And if it's okay with y'all, we're just going to run them together. So Jason will give his overview for community engagement, and then Jordan will jump in right behind, and maybe you'll even end up a little bit early. But before both of them go into greater detail, I wanted to just do a quick overview of the team that both Jason and Jordan are a part of, and Dan Harris, who you heard from a few weeks ago on events, and show you kind of the structure, because things have changed a little bit since I've been here about who does what with communications and engagement work here at the city. And then I'm going to hand it off to Jason first, and he's going to delve into community engagement programming more specifically. And then Jordan will wrap it up at the end, and we'll take any questions that you have. So Jason, do you mind pulling up the slides? I have the worst slides of the entire presentation, and there's only two.
Yes. Why does this always happen to me? I go to share and it tells me only all panelists.
Okay, you keep working on it, and I'm going to tell you what's on the slide because it's not that.
Not that
big of a deal. So the first slide that you'll see is just an org chart. And so we renamed ourselves the Strategic Engagement Team about 2 years ago, mainly because when you just say you're with the city manager's office, nobody knows what that is. I mean, we love Ann, but it doesn't really tell anybody anything about that we do communication or engagement work. So we call ourselves the Strategic Engagement Team now. And the positions that we have are the communications program manager, which is Jordan, the community engagement coordinator, which is Jason. We have our events and emergency management position, which is Dan. We now have a web services position, which is a part-time position, and that's Hannah. You guys probably know Hannah. She's been with the city for a long time. I used to share her with Scott, and now she's ours. Scott is a deputy recorder position of his own, but that's a part-time position. And then we will have, I'm recruiting right now for a part-time administrative specialist that will serve not only this team, but Ann, and Justin as well. And then I know sometimes the mayor actually needs some help with some things too. So this is to try to get some administrative support back in the office, but it will only be part-time. We're going to give this a shot also as part of just, kind of reaching out to the community. There's a lot of people that we've talked to over the years that don't really have the capacity or desire to work full-time, but want to work part-time and would like to be a part of the team. So I'm really excited about this recruitment as an opportunity to bring some Milwaukie residents in and talk to them about joining us. So that's the team. Next slide, please. Okay, so what do we do? You're going to hear a lot more about this from Jason and Jordan, but external communications. So this is the team that produces and distributes the pilot, manages the city website, serves as the primary media contact when we get calls from TV stations and whatnot. And I will say that the police department, they do have their own PIO, and they get a lot of the hot questions directly over there. But for the rest of the city departments, that usually runs through us. We're the keepers of the brand, right? So the font and the style and the colors that we use. And then also, I think one thing that I hope you'll get a good grasp of tonight is do a lot of actual graphic design support, either through contracting that out or producing materials in-house. And Jordan will be talking to you more there. For the community engagement side, NDAs are our neighborhood district associations, all of them, and their meetings and supporting them, and the grant program associated with that is in that part of the group. Engage Milwaukie, you'll hear more about that as well. It's increasingly a really important platform for us to communicate and hear from our residents. And then also just that direct support to other city projects. So we have a lot of work happening in the city right now. We are requiring that those projects have engagement plans. Jason provides a lot of direct support to help them craft strategies and find resources to get their engagement work done. Events, those are the high profile ones. You come to them. Dan just talked to you about them. Not going to spend a lot more time talking about events, but In addition to just putting on the signature events, we're also the ones that are reviewing and processing all of the event permits that come to the city. And then trying to think through how we manage our events program overall. Government relations, you have a horrible government relations staff person. She talks to you every couple of weeks about pressing items. But this is, that is within this team, just trying to think through how best to help you all and help ourselves kind of work with other governmental entities at the local, regional, and state level, and sometimes federal. Emergency management. This is a moving target, but it is officially within the city manager's strategic engagement team portfolio now. A lot of what this position is doing is facilitating communication at the director level to respond to threats. Definitely this year, spending a lot more time focused on being a direct point of contact to CERT volunteers in the community and PSAC, and then also helping us evaluate what are our citywide training needs for emergency management and how do we want to meet those. And then last but not least, this team also really does help quite a bit with internal communications. The main way that they do that is by supporting the city manager. She, particularly in the past 2 years, has spent a lot of time communicating directly with the entire city on a regular basis about all things COVID. So helping craft those messages is something that this team does. And then also helping the HR department. We have the public-facing website, but we also have the intranet and supporting that as well. So with that, I'm going to hush because I talk to you all a lot, and Jason and Jordan don't. And if you're ready, you can take over.
Sure. Yeah. Hi, everybody. I haven't been in city council in a while, so it's good to see you all. So community engagement is, you can basically ask questions as I go, but I'll also hopefully spend some time, leave some time at the end here to let you ask any other questions that you might have. I'm going to basically concentrate on 4 areas. I'm going to talk a little bit more about what I do. It's kind of evolved over time and it keeps evolving. I'm going to talk a little bit about 3 goals we set in 2020. There was a lot of other goals that came out of community engagement when it was a city council goal, but the 3 that I'm going to talk about are kind of most relevant to, especially during our COVID time when it comes to engagement. I'll talk a little bit about in-person engagement we were able to get back to in 2021. We actually were able to do, once I put it all together, actually a decent amount of in-person engagement compared to 2020, that's for sure. And then I'll talk a bit about some engagement goals we have for 2022. So myself as the engagement, the community engagement coordinator, as Kelly mentioned, I'm part of what we call the SET team here in the city manager's office. And generally, I do things like developing and sharing best practices with the city. We have a community engagement guide that I've shared with in the past. I try to keep that as updated as possible. Keeping up with what the International Association for Public Participation is doing. Jordan's actually on their board locally, so he helps also kind of make sure we're up and doing the latest and greatest things as possible. We help with community engagement plans, whether that's crafting them or reviewing them. Or basically just helping folks through those, whether it's large projects or smaller projects as well. We definitely work with consultants, including trying to figure out when to hire consultants, but also once they're on board, especially the engagement consultants, how we can, as seamlessly as possible work with them. And we're continually trying to find better ways to do that. We have an internal engagement team that will be coming on board again. I know back when community engagement was a city council goal, we had a task force that got that going. That kind of ended. And so this year we're going to put together a new engagement team that's going to consist of someone from all of the different departments so that we can share resources, talk about ideas, make sure that we're all kind of working together as best we can. As you know, I manage the Neighborhood District Association program and work with those folks a lot. Engagement Milwaukie, I'm the lead on Engage Milwaukie, and that's really the bulk of my conversation tonight. And I'm a web team member. There's 3 of us as the webmasters. And lastly, I tend to be the volunteer liaison. Folks, I talk to a lot of people about just, hey, I want to get involved with the city, and I help them sort of find their way, what might be the best way for them to get involved. And there's other things as well, but other duties as assigned, of course. So the goals that we had in October 20, I'm going to talk about is enhance online engagement, improve consistency of the data collected and shared. And that's really improving the data that we collect about who we're engaging with, but also how we're engaging and are we doing a good job. And then finally, evaluating with an equity lens. So these have been kind of on our radar for a while. I'm really going to probably talk about the first one the most, as you saw in the staff report. So Engage Milwaukie, we launched engage.milwaukeeoregon.gov in November 12, 2020. So we're about 15 months in, which is why, this is a good time to start talking about like what we're seeing. I took a lot of these numbers from December 30th. They've changed a little bit in the last month. But since I started working on this in December, I couldn't, go back and forth. But it does give you a good example of kind of what things look like. So right now we have about 738 registered users. That's about 3.5% of the population. We've launched 14 projects and there's 5 currently active. You're going to see a new project launch soon on broadband, actually, that I've been working with Brandon on. The top 3 projects in terms of like total number of people that engaged, City Hall Open House was very popular when it was being when it was launched. The comp plan implementation for phase 1, definitely, it's been on there since day 1. And, as it's gone, it has a lot of traffic. And then the Central Milwaukee Bikeway Connection Project, which is a really short-term project, but it was very popular. I think, you throw Bikeway in there and, there's a dedicated group of folks that really want to engage on that, and there's that topic. So really what we're seeing, we're growing a sort of this engaged online community. And I talked to council about that when we first launched this. Is like our goal is to get this online community of people that we can go back to time after, time and time again. And what we're really seeing is when we launch a project, like when we launched the Urban Renewal Project, we instantly, within minutes, you see people starting to engage with it. And, it's really great to see that. And, we send out an email newsletter, hey, 738 people, there's something on the site, go engage. And all of a sudden, there's activity. We've seen very few users unsubscribe, which is a really good sign. So folks that have subscribed 15 months ago are sticking with us. So that, that's a really good sign that they're not tired of it and, they're not bored of it. They didn't come on just for one project. They're there for the long haul. So now I'm just going to kind of launch into kind of who we're reaching and who we're not. So when folks register, they're asked 5 required questions: birth year, gender, race, and connection to Milwaukie. And then there's 4 additional questions that we ask that are optional. The good news is 75% of the users are also answering those questions. So they're not getting there going, no, I don't want to answer those questions. Yeah, Councilor Beatty?
Those are only 4 questions in the first one?
Yes.
Do you know offhand what the 5th is?
Oh, 5. Did I say 5 required questions? Birth year, gender, race, connection, what? What is the other one?
I didn't mean to stump you.
It's okay. You got me there though.
Okay.
I think there's 5.
I'll look at your staff report. Maybe it's answered there.
We're going to talk about each one of these, so we will get to it, and I'll remember when I get there. I promise. But yeah, as I was saying, folks aren't necessarily turned away by the additional questions. The reason that we split them up is we didn't want to ask too many questions when we first created this, which could be a deterrent if you're saying, hey, answer these 9 questions. So I'm just going to jump right into each one of these. So we were able to basically I was able to take some of these demographics, and keep in mind, these are not statistically valid, numbers here. A lot of folks, we don't have as many people obviously filling out the final questions, and then some of the folks in the beginning chose not to answer some questions. So it's not perfect, but I think it paints a pretty good picture at the same time. So when we're looking at age, anytime in any of these slides you see total pop period, that means the total population from the census that I was able to find information on for that particular number. So when I say 18 to 44-year-olds, we're getting 43% of users, but 37% of the population is 18 to 44 years old. So what we're seeing is we're reaching the sort of young working folks. We're basically reaching sort of middle-aged working folks, and then also folks who are retired. What we're not reaching is under 18. We have about 3 users that are under 18 using the platform, and that consists of 22% of the population. So we certainly need to do some work there in terms of, reaching out to the schools and others to maybe find out ways to get more young people involved. Next is gender. 64% have identified as women. This particular point, we don't have census information on gender. Obviously, we only really know that 51% of the population is female and 49% are male. But we do know that more women are interacting than men, which is interesting. Quite a few, actually. I guess we need to get more men involved. And what we also don't know is, how many folks in our community identify as transgender, non-binary, genderqueer, third gender. We do know that we have folks that are interacting with the site who identify as such, but we can only assume that, we should continue to do more work in that area and try to welcome folks in as much as possible. But the good sign is that we do have folks who are interacting on the site who identify as transgender and so forth. So race or ethnic identity, we're hitting the white population almost perfectly. We have 89% users and 88.5% of our population identifies as white. And there's some other areas that we think we're doing an okay job on, but we obviously want to get those numbers up as well. And that includes, Black or African American. We do have 1% of users, which amounts to 9 people as identifying, but that does go along with our, the census numbers. That doesn't mean we're going to stop trying to reach out to folks, who identify as, Black or African American, but we have a decent amount of population. 1% of folks identify as Native American, American Indian, or Alaskan Native. Our really biggest deficit that we're looking at are folks we're not reaching is the Hispanic and Latino. I mean, our population is 9.2%, and we're only reaching 3% in our numbers. So we know that's an area that we need to do some work on. I think we're going to start translating more material on the site, so maybe that'll help. There's some other areas that we can continue to work in that area too. And Asian Americans, we're at 2%, total population 3.4. So not as much of a gap there, but still some work to be done. Income. So through my research with this, I realized that on our registration on Engage Milwaukie, I'm just gonna confess, we left out 40,000 to 49,999 people who make $40,000 to $50,000. It's fixed now, but what you're going to see on here is 9% of our population isn't taken into account because those 9% of our population makes between $40,000 and $50,000 household income. But we were still able to learn quite a bit from this. 85% of our users make between 50 and 150,000 or more. And we know our total population is about 61% in that area. So we're definitely doing a good job on the higher incomes. What we're not doing a good job on is the 30% of our population who make 10,000 to about 40, who make up 30% of our population. So we have some work to do there. And these numbers aren't necessarily that surprising. I mean, I think there are barriers, obviously, for low-income folks to interact with us online. And it's just something to be aware of as we move forward, for sure. This next one, connection to Milwaukie. This question on when folks are registering, it's kind of more anecdotal. People can fill out either one of these or all of them. It's just kind of a way to get us some general idea about some of these things. So I don't have percentages, I don't have census numbers here, but if you look at the numbers, we're definitely reaching people who live in the city who own their home. That's, the 2 top. We definitely need to do some work in terms of rentals. I mean, we have 82 users who are identified as rental, and we know that, that number should be higher. And the business community, we have 13 business owners who identify as owning a business on the site. And so we certainly would like to get that up as well. So we need to reach out to more of the business community. Neighborhood or business area, the top 3 neighborhoods are Ardenwald, Lake Road, and Historic Milwaukie. A lot of this could have to do with what projects we've had on there so far. Lake Road was on there, sort of could be proximity to, interest just because the project was in that neighborhood. we do know that we need more folks in the business industrial area and the North Milwaukie innovation area. We have 4 users who identify themselves as kind of being involved in those areas. We do have quite a few unincorporated Clackamas County at 73, which is interesting. So we got folks around us also using the site. City of Portland as well, 24. So, people are taking notice of us and wanting to interact with us for sure.
Jason,
Yeah.
can I ask a question on that last one?
Yeah, sure.
I'm also cognizant of the fact that we have dramatically different populations in our different neighborhoods. And I don't know if you know those off the top of your head, but I think that would be useful context for this slide in particular. I don't know, I would guess that Linwood is probably our most populous, or Ardenwald. But I don't know for a fact. So.
Like total population numbers in terms of,
Right. Yeah. Because, Island Station has 600 residents. So.
Right.
Anyway.
So you're right. In terms of how well they're doing, it's kind of hard to compare it to Ardenwald, who has certainly a lot more residents.
Right. Yeah. The proportionality is important in understanding what these numbers really mean.
Definitely.
Yeah. Anyway, thanks.
Very good point, though. I'll be probably doing this another year to council. So next time I'll think about these things for sure. That's a good point.
I also have a question on that slide. Were those single choice options?
Yes.
Okay.
And they're part of the optional, so we don't have quite as many people. I guess the only question I had there was with our Ardenwald Johnson Creek. It overlaps. It includes Portland residents as well. So that's a really good point too. Yeah. So the next one was sexual orientation. Again, we don't necessarily have a baseline for this. We know reaching heterosexual and straight folks, but we do see, people identifying as gay or lesbian and bisexual, and a sexuality not listed. So we're definitely reaching folks who identify as such, and we'll again continue to try to reach out to folks as much as possible. But it gives us at least an indication.
Kathy, do you have another question?
Yeah.
Sorry, I saw her hand up, and I didn't know if that was from before or.
No, it's just a holdover. Thanks. Yeah.
And then the final one was in language used most at home. We're definitely reaching English-speaking homes. The biggest one that stuck out for me was Spanish. We had no one identify as primarily using Spanish at home. We did have one Russian, 3 a language or dialect not listed, and one of them actually completed where we asked them to actually say what language it was, and it was German. The other 2 didn't list. And Vietnamese also was 0. We did have 4 folks that identify as speaking American Sign Language, so that's interesting to see as well. But again, I don't necessarily know if that's good or bad. If we're reaching like a good percentage of folks compared to our population or not. But I think the Spanish, hopefully, as we start to translate more on the site, that'll hopefully attract more folks to want to interact with it. So that was basically, I just wanted to give you, that was sort of the demographics. I don't necessarily have a slide that says, well, now we're going to fix all this by this, and this. But I think this is all going to be built into how we move forward this next year and beyond. This is going to help us at least figure out online with that tool who we should try to reach and where we need to try to make some effort, put some extra effort into. So, yeah.
Lisa has a question.
Yeah, going back to the Spanish, the Spanish speakers, we did do, I think, the comp plan and the city hall project in Spanish language on there. And so obviously that didn't find its audience. And I know we've sort of agreed in principle to translating the pilot into Spanish. So how do we get those to the people? The pilot, I assume there'll be some way people can you may intend to hand it out through some community organizations, or maybe there's ways people can subscribe to get it mailed. But yeah, I guess we've been doing some translation for the last year or more, and it's not reaching the people. So how do we fix that?
Jason, do you mind if I jump in on this one? Just like, I know that Jordan will talk pilot translation too when he gets into his, but in terms of the pilot, so this is actually the first month. The February edition is the first one that's getting translated, and we're doing digital for this one. And then the next step that we'd like to take is copies at the library, and then also thinking through other areas where we believe that we would have people visiting that are Spanish speakers. The mailing to homes part is kind of level 3, right? Because that one is hard because the way we mail to every home. We don't have a running list. So that's definitely identifying how do we engage with folks that want that, and then provide it to them is a thing that Jordan's thinking a lot about, and I'm trying to help sort through that next step. But right now we're actually, I'm really excited. We're like getting it translated and can provide it digitally, and then we'll start running copies of it to leave in specific locations. So I think that would be a helpful council input item too, as well as if when you're out and about in the community, you're like, stack of translated pilots here would be really great to know. Maybe, the Milwaukie Center or things like that. So that's that one. The other question you asked about the online piece, and I'll just say where I've struggled, is what's great about online is it's instantaneous and you can have a conversation. So we don't currently have someone on the team who's a fluent Spanish speaker, right? And a lot of our project managers are not. So typing in and responding to that question you asked on the Engage Milwaukie site quickly, and how to do that, I think that's when we'll start to get more people involved, and staying involved is not only when they can read static information, but they can get responses back and interact with someone in their language. So I think I don't know quite how to do it yet, but that's what we're talking about. Yeah.
And I think just continuously talking about the fact that it exists too. I think people are still learning that it's here, and maybe we put some information in the Spanish pilot about the fact that it's here, and people can interact with it. Hopefully help.
The school district does a fair amount of Spanish language, Facebook posts, social media posts. So that's also, to direct people to resources like that. So that may be a tool to use as well.
Yeah, in the schools, I would definitely have a stack of Spanish language ones in the school administration office in the Milwaukie High School, because you do have a lot of Spanish speaking parents who are coming in and out of that building.
And the Wichita Center, for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I want to make sure I move on so that Jordan has plenty of time. He'll be mad at me if I don't. So in terms of this next, the goal was improve consistency of the data collected and shared. Basically, like I said, it's basically trying to figure out who are we engaging with and collecting that data, and then also evaluating how we're doing and making sure we understand if we're doing a good job or not. So Engage Milwaukie, as you've heard, we're learning that how our online community, our biannual community survey, that'll hopefully help us figure out, folks who aren't engaging online and some of the general public, giving us feedback on how we're engaging, how people want to be engaged with, so on and so forth. And then we're really trying to build more and more on project-specific engagement plans. And I'm going to be working this year to basically try to collect some of the same kind of data project by project for people we're engaging with, to make sure that, what we're, it can kind of cross-tabulate with what we're collecting for Engage Milwaukie as well. Hopefully that works. The final goal that I wanted to mention from 2020 was basically just evaluating engagement using an equity lens. And I'm not going to talk a lot about that tonight, but basically it's built into all of everything that we're doing right now. Those conversations are, rise to the top. There's a lot of more work to be done in that area, but we definitely are constantly having those conversations, which is great to see. So in-person engagement in 2021, I mostly put this list together to show that, we were able to do some things. Some things aren't necessarily considered engagement all the time, but like the prescription drug drop-off, and Striding Day, We did do some, the engineering folks did some like 42nd and 43rd Avenue improvement open house in November. There was a Lake Road improvement live Q&A that they did back in August. We were able to do our umbrella parade. So we're excited about the next year and hopefully starting to do more of this, but we're able to do some in 2021. So that's a win. So just to mention some goals that I have and we have, we definitely want to grow registered users on Engage Milwaukie. I say 1,200 by the end of the year. I'd love to see, twice that if possible. We're going to definitely try. We're going to kick off this new internal engagement team, and I think that'll help us, communicate across departments, hopefully better, and, develop new ideas. We want that community booth back at the farmers market, hopefully, because we didn't have that last year, and I think that was something that people were missing. We're definitely supporting our projects as much as possible, and that's going to be a lot of our work is, making sure that those new park projects and then community engagement there, we're able to lend a hand there, all of our different SAVE projects and so forth. We want to complete our community survey, of course. The NDAs, some of the goals are basically just getting back to hybrid meetings, hopefully. If we can, we have an orientation and training annually now in June for new folks who are elected. If anyone's interested in that, we're really making sure we're sticking to quarterly leadership meetings. We have one coming up on February 17th. Council's always welcome to come and join us if you'd like. We want to develop some goals and strategies to diversify the NDAs. I'm not exactly sure what that looks like yet, but that's something that I definitely would like to look at more. And then I'll be back in April with a council check-in with the NDA. So I'll be working with them over the next couple of months to come up with a good summary of how things are going and make sure that we have all the NDAs there at that meeting. We're looking forward to returning to our signature events, such as Carefree Sunday and whatnot, and doing some engagement there. Those are great opportunities that we've been missing. And there's other goals as identified through the year. So hopefully we can make all of this happen in the next 12 months, or I guess 10 months now. Any other questions before I kick it off to Jordan? I'll be here if you can think of something, so I'm not going anywhere.
Great. Thank you, Jason. That was great.
Thanks.
Jordan.
Yeah, let me just share my screen here real quick. Okay, so Kelly gave a good overview of what we already do, and just to kind of tell you how communication, or how we try to have it work at the city, is we try to centralize it as much as possible. So most of the content for what's on social media, the pilot, the website, community engagement, everything like that, all kind of comes through this team to review and to look at, and just refine it just to make sure that, things are consistent and things, meet all the other things I'm about to talk about, like branding and writing standards and things like that. And then, or we just help in the creation of messages and try to give advice and just kind of, give it our best practices and help people like that. But yeah, we try to have as much as possible come through us, especially also like media, things like that, just so we have a unified voice and it's consistent. Sorry, I'm having a hard time getting the slide to move. There we go. Okay, so I'm basically, like Kelly said, the branding police of the city of Milwaukie. Anything about the logo comes through me. It's not often that people want to change it. Every once in a while they do. More often than not, it's more like, how do we make it smaller with making it still look good? Something like that, putting it on a new website or a new platform. But also, sometimes people do suggest changes and we try to see if that'll work or not. And then see how it fits in still with the identity if we do that. Along with the logo, it's just trying to help everyone use the same color palette, fonts. But then also along with that, there's some nuance that goes into trying to find, good design that matches messages. And that's also, consistent with branding. And also, just so it has kind of the same look and feel and it kind of, looks, as professional as possible. while still being, relevant to the audience. And a good part of, or an important part of branding that is sometimes overlooked is writing standards. And we use essentially AP style, which is, inherently designed to be the most accessible for everybody. And also it provides a good guide, kind of like a news style guide of, writing a lead, writing the most important things first, including the who, what, when, where, why. So that all goes into branding as well, and also helps us just be transparent and, helps community members know what to look for and what to expect, and create somewhat of a relationship that way with the community. Along with branding goes graphic design, and it's a pretty, I guess, intricate process sometimes, but it's fairly straightforward. We have professional, which primarily we use Gabe from PDX Designs. I think almost everybody knows him by now. And he's great. And because we've used him so much, he's inherently kind of created an identity for the city and a look and feel. And to brag a bit, we're sort of the envy of a lot of cities. I mean, we get requests all the time to know who our graphic designer is and how do you guys come up with these things. I mean, even like the school district one time said they wanted to use like the goose as like some sort of identifying thing, and they said, but you probably don't want to get rid of that, right? Like you don't want to let us use that or co-opt it. We're like, yeah, I guess, yeah, we'll claim the Canada goose for right now as part of our identity. But a lot of the graphic design requests, we try to centralize those too, and that's mainly for efficiency, but then also it's pretty good way to save money. If there's not like 5 or 6 different staff people trying to go out to a graphic designer to request edits or work on other projects, it can get really expensive. And so this helps kind of streamline that. Another way is if I create it myself, or sometimes other staff members will create things and will help with that. I wish I could do more of this. I enjoy doing it, but I have other things too that I have to do. So I don't always get that chance, which is why, other stuff goes out to consultants. I'm also not great, so I think I'm okay. But yeah, it's fun to do it with people and try to, and I think that just helps, with branding as well. And then another part of graphic design is looking at what our consultants come up with. And most often we provide them with like the branding guide. And then we also usually meet with them a couple times too, like just kind of throughout projects. Like most recently, we were meeting with the consultants that are helping with Natalie's program with the urban tree forest, and helping them kind of create a look that's signature to that, but also works with branding. And this is a kind of an array of marketing materials that have been created recently to kind of show you what we're going for. Graphic design and marketing can go into things as complicated as kind of what's on the far left, which is the PAFR, big robust document, but trying to make it look interesting to figure out what's going on and read about the budget. To all the way to just like a T-shirt, kind of like we had at Carefree Sunday, or like the ones in the middle with the virtual meet and greet with John, or the virtual open house for the comp plan. I mean, just trying to, and that's kind of how this team works. Is we do the whole gambit. Another big component of my position is doing the pilot. Just to remind everybody, we don't do a January issue, in case you thought you didn't get it in the mailbox. I think everybody forgets that. But yeah, do 11 issues a year. And sometimes those have inserts, sometimes they don't. The content all comes from city staff. I put out a call for content to all the departments, and it's a lot of times it's on them to tell me if there's something they want to share. But if I know of something, or if Kelly and Ann or Jason know of something, that needs to be in there, or it's important, we'll strongly suggest that they write an article or offer to help write it for them, or, hey, just send me some bullet points. We'll put it together for you. And kind of like how we talked about before, the pilot is sent deliberately through bulk mail. So it's the cost savings of postage. If we were to send it first class, I think one of the estimates was almost triple, I think, of what we pay right now. But that also doesn't, at the same time, it doesn't get us the ability to let people opt out if they don't want it. That doesn't happen that often, but every once in a while that request comes through. Bulk mail also has a few other interesting things that happen with it. Sometimes you can't really depend on when it's delivered or if it's delivered. Like all of a sudden they'll just skip a section of their route and they don't get it, or they get extra copies and then it starts going to unincorporated and people learn about bulky waste day or, leaf drop, and that can cause some confusion when they're not allowed to participate because it's a Milwaukie resident service. But for the most part, I think it's delivered pretty well, and it's not as crazy expensive as it could be. And we are, like you mentioned, beginning to translate it into Spanish. The February pilot is with Effective TIF. I don't know how to say their last part of their name, but they're translating it now. We haven't gotten back yet, but once we do, it'll be up on the city website. And then, we'll have a discussion later about how we're going to print it off and where it's going to go. We do have a contract with Pamplin newspaper, or community newspapers, the other name they go by. So I think we do have to look into their contract a bit just to see how that might affect like the cost, or if you do like an amendment or something. Another part of my job is the website. I'm one of the webmasters. Jason is another one. And then Hannah Wells, who is also on the team, is another webmaster. We split those duties, and then, we work together and with other staff to find ways to either promote their stuff to the homepage or find ways to organize it on the website. As you know, it's a kind of a crazy website sometimes. You can't always find what you're looking for. It doesn't seem like it works sometimes, but we're trying our best, I guess is all I can say. But we're trying to work with basically the platform we have and how it's been set up. Another big part of the website and how it's structured is the fact that we have content managers. So each department has one person who's kind of like in charge of that department's content and how it gets on the web, just so they're not completely reliant on the webmasters, which would probably end up taking a long time to get it on, just given like all the different things that needs to go up related to our own jobs too. So that's a way we've sort of decentralized that, but still have a centralized way of working with the content managers, and then also how we can go into the website too and do things. And then, one project that will likely come up soon is doing some sort of website refresh or update, but nothing's for sure with that yet. Here's just a little quick overview of our social media at the moment. I think I haven't really ever given a presentation like this, like an overview of my own job, but this, I'm mainly counting on just for social media, but so this is kind of where we are right now. Facebook continues to, outpace everybody else. However, it has slowed recently, and Instagram is kind of skyrocketing. It's almost doubled within the past like 10 months. So it's doing really well. And Twitter is a little stagnant. It just kind of keeps it's had about the same amount of followers, for a couple of years, but and then recently have been starting doing more on LinkedIn, posting some jobs and things like that. That's definitely an area that we want to do more in, and I'd like to see some more effort put in there, just because I think there's also, other ways to build your brand professionally on LinkedIn that, don't afford you that on the other platforms. And I was just seeing a moment, I think Instagram is another place just that we need to focus on to get some more younger demographics. So I have some analytics. They're pretty much all from Facebook, just because Twitter, we just don't have enough going on there to give great ones. But also Instagram changed how they collect analytics, and I need to go in and like switch our account to a business account so we can start collecting better analytics. And that's something I'm going to do very soon here. But so here's the breakdown for gender, at least on Facebook. And they do have other options to select for gender. However, either the people who follow us didn't select them, or it's so low that maybe their analytics kind of like averaged them out. But by far, more women are engaged on Facebook than men. And that is actually a higher skew than what Facebook's normal distribution is. They have about, I think it's 55% women to 45% men that typically use it, and ours definitely skews more towards women. But definitely helpful to know as we create content. And this is how it breaks down for where people are coming from. And this one was interesting to me because, obviously there's a lot from Milwaukie, but there's a lot from other areas too. And we get a pretty good poll. So definitely see how we are, more well-known in the region maybe than, I previously thought. But I think, we do get a lot of bumps and these, the people who follow us, like from other cities, like when we have something like Winter Solstice or Carefree Sunday, especially Winter Solstice, you know, it's a big regional poll. And so people will start following us to learn about, you know, events and things like that. And this is a breakdown of kind of like how the links, when we post links, work with the website. So, these are just two examples. The first one is from a recent post when we talked about the part-time administrative specialist position. And the jobs page is, I think it's almost or the most popular page on our website. It averages about 100 or so views a day. And that popped up to just under 500 when we posted the job. And then, you know, it kind of trickles down, but then it also, I didn't have room to put it all, but then it pops right back up towards like the deadline. Everyone kind of goes back, but it definitely creates that awareness and then like a little bit of a sustained audience on there. And the one below, that was a post for Engage Milwaukie. And I mean, the audience is smaller, so that's why the numbers are smaller, but there was definitely a spike from that. And you know, one of the nice things about, you know, I think our Facebook is, and our social media in general is like, I mean, it is pretty civil. I mean, all things considered, like we don't have like this, you know, rampant like chaos kind of going on our posts. I think that's pretty good. And that was sort of confirmed too lately when we did the post about the broadband survey coming up. Brandon Gill, the IT manager, he's always, I think, really been skeptical of using anything on social media just because of how it typically ends up going. But he was just telling Jason, he's like, wow, I was surprised, you know, people kind of came to our defense and, you know, people were, you know, pretty, you know, reasonable on there. He's like, I didn't know that happened or it could happen on there. So that was a nice testament to how things are going on our page. I think that's great. So moving on to another component of my position, and this isn't necessarily tied to my position in particular. I just happen to be the staff liaison for the Arts Committee. I enjoy doing it. It's great. I think it's, you know, one of the more fun things I get to do. And so some of my time spent helping them, obviously, like with their goals and activities and events. They're a busy group. I don't know. I'm one of the busier ones, I think, for boards and committees and, you know, commissions. Lots of management of public murals. That's been one of their big projects lately. You can see the picture up there that's not finished yet, but that's the mural that's going to go in Chapel Theater pretty soon. The last part is just basically installing it on the walls of their building. That cutout is going over one of the windows, and I think they have another cutout for like a light or something like that, but it'll wrap around the corner so you can see it when you're coming down Harrison. But what I think is great about the Arts Committee and why I think even if I'm not the staff liaison, like it makes a lot of sense for the staff liaison to be in this team because it has such a strong component of Milwaukee's identity. I think they have this way of capturing like a part of the community that we don't often see unless it's through like some sort of expressive activity, kind of like art like this. And so I think the Arts Committee is really, really great in like highlighting not just the talents and everything, but just the diversity of people that live in Milwaukie. So some of the things that I've been working most on over the past few years is obviously the pandemic. And there was a lot of work that went into finding, you know, like good graphics and good marketing materials to talk about not just, you know, what was happening at the city, but to also help talk about like regulations like wearing masks. And, you know, internally we have signs around here like trying to like, you know, make sure you're cleaning your workstations and, you know, following those guidelines but also like using like the goose and trying to find a fun way to kind of help people do what they need to be doing, but also not make it like it's, you know, something that's really tough or scary or something like that. Along with the COVID-19 communication with some small business relief funding. And that's kind of like what can come up a lot is just, you know, promoting different programs that are new or either short-term programs, comprehensive plan implementation project, several phases of that. And that's ongoing communication that, you know, Jason's also helping with. Lots of safe stuff with closures and construction. People continuously come back to, you know, to learn about any impacts to traffic and, you know, maybe get upset if we don't share anything. So, and that's been a big push. And we did a lot around the city hall repurposement and like the next chapter of its life and emergencies. And then Engage Milwaukee's, you know, a lot of what we do, like Jason and I do, overlap, and so Jason and I will frequently collaborate on doing social media or pilots, you know, all the different ways of communicating that there is engagement opportunities on Engage Milwaukie. So definitely need a strong connection with that. And then obviously city events, that's kind of one of the biggest pushes. City events to always take up a lot of bandwidth just in terms of building awareness. But hopefully they kind of get to where like solstice level is, where you don't really have to say a whole lot about it. People just already know about it. So once we get to that, then we can kind of focus on other things. And I just kind of wanted to highlight this one kind of like tricky thing about communicating during a pandemic. It was like this constant balance of trying to bring awareness for things, but also like not too much awareness because you didn't want too many people showing up at an event. And it was probably the first, I don't know, maybe one of the first times in my life I had to do anything like that. Was like market, but don't do too good of a job at it, kind of a thing. we want some people there, just a good some number. And then, you know, but also just finding things that are relevant that people actually wanted to know about. Like, I don't know, I was constantly second guessing, like, do people even want to know about this right now when they're worried about so many other things? But, you know, trying to make it fun and trying to, you know, overcome, you know, just, you know, constant streams of bad news, put something in there that, you know, might be of interest to people. And then, you know, and also just talking about some of our events and activities that, you know, were virtual, but like, and finding ways to hold those, but, you know, not trying to deal with like the fatigue of having to have everything online. But, you know, I think our team did a really good job, and I think it'll probably continue for a while too. So we'll have to keep navigating this sort of, I don't know, it's not really a minefield, but it's just finding like kind of like what I said in the first flow. It's like this Goldilocks zone of trying to find, you know, good communication, but, you know, with the understanding that there's a lot of other things going on. So my goals that I've been working on lately, and that have been even before now too, is you know, working with John more and on equity and inclusion. I was working with him just trying to find some, you know, like language that we can start using better when we're communicating about events and programs. And one of the things that came up from I think one of the listening sessions was just, you know, saying something about like everybody is welcome, that somebody had said that they hadn't really heard that before, that, you know, they were welcome to come. So that's definitely been included in like signage and other posts about saying, just so you know, kind of like, you're more than welcome to come. No one's excluded here. But there's definitely needs to be more than that. And working with John too about like finding graphic designers too that can help with us. Most of you probably know, but Gabe has a job with school district now, so we probably can't use his services as much. So we need to find some other graphic designers anyway. And I think we need to find people that have different perspectives and, you know, can share different points of view. Another big one is analytics. You know, Jason included a lot of tried to include a lot of data today, but I think getting more is only going to help us. I'm also working with Hannah to kind of capture more like website data that we can share with city staff to sort of drive the content that's on their pages, and in turn that will help drive content on social media. And then I feel like I need to do a better job of doing like an evaluation process, like a really like earnest evaluation process. A lot of what we do, I think, is like what I've heard is called like judgmental analysis, or sort of like anecdotal analysis. I mean, we see things like, oh, there was a lot of people at an event, that must be great, like everything was good, or oh, people seemed happy. I mean, and that's a piece of it, but coming up with good metrics that we can use, and then also doing evaluation at several steps along the way in our campaigns and our strategies, about seeing if what we're doing is good and pivoting if we need to, and then doing some final reports too that we can kind of hold on to, because we do remember what we did and how we did it, but you know, capturing that like more officially and being able to reference it, I think will be really beneficial to us. And because we are just using virtual platforms all the time, finding some more ways to do that, but continuing to find interesting ways, like more interactive open houses, maybe open houses in different formats, and using more video, finding ways to create little snippets. We had really good feedback about some of the short ones we created for the city hall, like the virtual city hall tour, and we did a couple artist interviews with the muralists, and people responded really well, but I think we just need to expand that. So, and the city has a camera, and I'm going to start getting some more video and finding some more ways to share what we're doing and get the good word out there. I think I'm probably just about out of time. So yeah, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them, or also Jason.
So great presentation. I had a couple of thoughts that I wanted to throw out there. And I know that the first one is probably very photographer centric, but like when I was working through the CAFR this week, I saw a picture and I was like, oh, that's a great picture. Who shot it? And there's no photo credit. I know not a big deal, but if and when we can include photo credits on photos, it's really good practice, particularly since I suspect a lot of those were donated or next to free, or, you know.
Yeah, no, that's definitely something we'll do. I know we've done it a few times. Yeah, I'm trying to do it, but yeah, I think we need to do it more for sure. Yeah, some we do pay for, and then some are donated. So yeah, we should definitely credit the artists. And I think almost every one of our photos has been taken by somebody locally. So it's good to give a shout out anyway. Yeah, thanks. I'll do that.
And then more substantively, I'm kind of curious how you guys interact with the other departments, you know, like planning or climate or whatever, when they're doing their outreach stuff and their whatever they're doing, right? There's going to be outreach materials that they have to produce, and I'm wondering, are they mostly doing that themselves with some help from you, or are they saying, here's what we need to communicate, can you please put something together?
I think it's probably a mix, I would say. There are definitely some departments that come with, you know, just an idea in mind, and it's, you know, kind of rough on paper, and then we kind of hash it out. We typically meet like Jason and I, or Jason, Hannah, and I will all meet with somebody to talk about all the different ways they're going to communicate or do engagement. And so we'll talk about it then. Yeah, like we'll go through, but kind of also depends on if the staff person has a consultant or not. Sometimes the staff person will work with their consultant and then kind of come with us to review things and kind of put that sort of final stamp on it. Or we've also been brought in with the consultant sort of in the beginning and created it together. But for more of like, I don't know, I guess the day-to-day, like maybe if you're doing like just like a social media post or something, I guess that's also probably a mix. Well, if we don't really have a lot going on, we'll say like, hey, Vera, do you want to talk about something on the comprehensive plan? Or like, we'll talk to Dan about doing some more event posts or something like that. But because it is centralized, I mean, it kind of essentially all comes through us anyway, for like at least getting it out and like just distributing it on the platforms.
Right. Well, kind of where I was wondering about that is, I think you're actually a very good graphic designer, besides
thanks,
opposite of what you're saying. But I have done things when, and I've graphic designed something before, right? And I struggle with it for hours, and it looks like something that a professional did in 3 minutes, drunk. And so I just, it's in sort of a time sense, right? We've got planners that are supposed to be doing plannerly stuff, right? And we got a climate action person who's supposed to be doing more policy level stuff, negotiations and things like that. And I'm wondering about this amount of time that they end up spending putting together communication pieces that you're more equipped to do in a way. I don't want to denigrate what they've done either. I'm having a hard time wandering around this, and I'm sure I'm doing it poorly, but that's kind of where I was thinking about it.
Yeah, I think I get what you mean. Yeah, I think for the most part, yeah. Like if somebody needs like something designed, or like they need to come up with like a communication plan or something like that, and they don't really have any other staff or any other support, yes, definitely, I come and help them with that, and we'll help from start to finish with whatever they're doing. I guess like maybe the comprehensive plan is a good thing, or maybe a good example. Sometimes like when Mary was here, she actually really wanted to design stuff, and so she asked like, hey, can I just do this? And then you look at it and you can like tweak it and refine it. And I was good with that. And then like for, I think like one of the engineering events or some of the projects, I think it was like the Lake Road project, like Jennifer Garbley came and said, hey, will you design a whole poster for me to explain all these different things? And I was like, yeah, I'm more than happy to do that. So yeah, I think if there's a desire for people to do that kind of design work, like I don't try to stop them, but I do, yeah, like I definitely help step in if they don't really have anybody to help them. And I hope people don't think the onus is on them to like, do everything themselves. Cause yeah, like they can definitely shift some of that stuff to me.
But we don't have any kind of sort of standing policy or instructions or guidelines or anything that say, please send your design work to Jordan, or it's just however people are functioning with it.
I can jump in on that one. And I also think I see Joseph waiting. I don't know if he's anxious to get to the next thing, and we're probably talking over, but I will just add, no. I mean, essentially the way it works is everyone's got their own project budget. And if you're the project manager, you're managing the deliverables from your consultant, including the communications ones. But this team has done a good job of trying to make sure that we are a part of those scopes when they go out, so that we know what you're asking for. We understand if they're following the branding and style guidelines that the city's set forth. And definitely Jordan makes himself available, so to speak, he makes himself very available to people. But at the end of the day, when things are moving fast and folks have product to get out, sometimes, it gets out. We are still kind of a decentralized city in that respect. We don't have a big old communications budget that we then manage all of those products from. So we try, but I think what I would appreciate, if you don't mind, is like when you see things and you're like, hey, why does it look like that? If you can show me kind of examples of ways that like products that you're seeing that you have that question about, that would be really helpful to us, just because that group that Jason talked about too, in terms of the interdepartmental communication at the staff level, that's where some of that's gonna get worked out. So hopefully that helps. I'm happy to talk to you more about it. It's kind of an ongoing question that we have, is what process to establish and how best to use that process, and how tight it should be is something we talk a lot about.
Cool. We can talk about this offline, I guess. Yeah. Lisa has a question, and then Kathy.
I mainly had a comment. And I'm sorry I dropped off. My computer went out, and I don't know why it dropped me off. I had to reboot. But before I dropped off, you had said something about sort of bemoaning the state of the website to some degree. And I want to tell you that I think the website is pretty darn good. I remember where we came from. I think I always manage to find what I'm looking for. I think the search function on it works pretty good. I have a few little technical glitches I have from time to time, but I think it looks good. I used it for my phone recently, which is not something I do hardly ever. And it was even easy from there. So I think the website looks great. And I think your branding stuff, I think that's all been really successful. I think you've done a great job at that.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, it's very nice of you.
Yeah, and I'll echo that the amount of product and work that you all are able to churn out with so few people is incredible to me. And I'm not a graphic designer. I'm even less of a graphic designer than you, Jordan, but I know enough about it to know how much time that can take. And our branding is really excellent for a city. I think it's head and shoulders above what a lot of other cities produce with larger departments. My one comment is just around that website refresh, and I do think that the website it does what it needs to do. This is not a critique. This is feedback that I received from a number of community members that it's really hard to access and navigate the job postings in a mobile format. So I just wanted to pass that along because I think particularly as we're trying to hopefully recruit more community members, we want to make sure that that piece in particular is working. So when you get to that point, I think that would be a great place to maybe spend a little time if you could and see if that can work a little better.
Yeah, we actually did a little shift recently, so it might be a little easier. Instead of having like that's kind of like strange window sort of like framed into it. Now there's just a link that goes out to NeoGov, so it's hopefully easier to navigate, and it should be mobile friendly because I don't think it was before.
Yeah.
But if not, I'll check it too on my own phone to see what it looks like. But hopefully that helped a bit.
Great, I love it. Thanks.
I just want to make a really quick comment about all of the reporting the demographic data from the various engagement pieces. You know, it wasn't that long ago that we did not collect any of that information at all. And so we had no way of reflecting on how successful or unsuccessful we were at reaching different, segments of the community. And I think, you can't really even know where to start, if you don't know where you are. So thank you for really diving into that, really taking that seriously, and using it as a tool for, reflection and improvement.
Well, we're a little over, but great job, you guys. Thank you very much. And I need to find my script again. Hang on. Sorry. Scott, you said it was at the end of the script? End of the packet? Or is it the beginning?
The executive session citations at the end of the work session, but there is one more work session agenda, and I have it up to Mr. Mayor.
Oh, work session agenda. Sorry, I was looking at the bottom of the packet.
You're good.
Okay, executive session. After the work session, council will meet in executive session pursuant to Oregon Revised Statute ORS 192.66.
Mark, I think we have something else.
Yeah, we do. We have.
Oh, I'm so sorry. You're right.
We have H3.
You're right. I'm so sorry. Take it. All right, great. Hillside Manor, but more importantly, I think this is just an update from H3S about HOMA services. Is that predominantly?
Yes, Mayor Gamba, I'll jump in. Good evening. Just Relio, Community Development Director, Hello Council. You might remember from November 16th, it was the night of the Hillside Plan Development was approved by you all. We actually had the Housing Authority scheduled to speak that night, but that night ran a little bit longer. And so we asked them to come back, and here they are. And yes, it is primarily around the supportive housing services program. So with that, I'll introduce Devin Allen, who's the Housing Development Manager, and Vahid Brown, who's the Supportive Housing Services Program Manager. And if you want me to drive the presentation, or you guys can as well, it's probably maybe easiest. You go right ahead, Deb.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So should I just pull up my slide deck and share? Okay.
Sure.
Is everyone able to see this? Okay. So good evening. I'm Devin Ellen. I'm the Housing Development Manager with the Housing Authority of Clackamas County. And as Joseph said, I'm joined today by Vahid Brown, our Supportive Housing Services Manager. And we're here to talk about some of the programs underway at the Housing Authority. So
Devin, I just wanted to maybe highlight for you that the screen that we're seeing is the one that has your notes and the thumbnails on the side. I just wanted to make sure you were aware of that.
Thank you. Let's see here.
I can always share my screen too if you want to keep your notes, Devin. And
Yeah, that would be helpful. Now it's taking over my whole.
You go ahead and stop sharing. I'll share away.
Okay.
Tell me to move
Thank
forward. You got it. No problem.
Okay. Let's see. So can you go to the next slide? Okay, let me just get oriented here. Okay. So what does the Housing Authority do? The Housing Authority of Clackamas County was the first housing authority in the state and has been providing affordable and safe housing opportunities for our residents for over 80 years. Our work consists of much more than the Metro Bond and Supportive Housing Services Program. That includes public housing. We operate 445 units of public housing, which are single-family homes and duplexes rented to low-income households with rents that do not exceed 30% of their income. We also own and operate affordable housing with rents reduced below market. Examples of this type of housing are tax credit developments like Easton Ridge Apartments and the newly remodeled Hillside Manor. We oversee a variety of rental assistance programs that allow our households to rent from private market landlords with rental subsidy to make it affordable. Our resident services team delivers food, holds vaccination clinics, and offers connections to services for our public housing residents. On the operations side, our asset management and finance team ensures our properties are safe and well maintained. And Vahid and I will cover the next two items, the Metro Bond and the Supportive Housing Services Measure. So if you could go to the next slide, please. Oh, maybe the one after that. So my department oversees the administration of the county's Affordable Housing Bond Program, known as the Metro Bond Program. And just to make sure we're all on the same page here, this program provides funding for capital costs associated with development of affordable units and is separate but complementary to the Supportive Housing Services Measure. As you know, the nearly $653 million bond measure was approved by voters at the end of 2018, and each county contributes a different percentage of the property taxes based on how many counties' homes fall within the boundary. So this means that 45% of homes created through the bond will be in Multnomah County, 34% in Washington County, and 21% in Clackamas County. So the total bond revenues dedicated to Clackamas County are just over $116 million. And as a county without entitlement cities, all bond resources run through the Housing Authority. So after finalizing our local implementation strategy, the Housing Authority released our first Notice of Funding Availability, or NOFA, in January of 2020. In response, a total of $43 million was awarded to subsidize the development of 414 units over 3 projects located in Happy Valley, Oregon City, and unincorporated Clackamas County. We're aiming to release our second NOFA this summer and hope to make approximately $23 million available with the goal of supporting the development of 200 new affordable units. Next slide. To date, we have awarded $48 million, or 42% of our total bond allocation, to support 4 units. So this includes the Housing Authority's Phase 1 pilot project in Gladstone. With 42% awarded, we're tracking towards 57% of our total unit production goal, with 461 units underway. Are you seeing the presentation? Sounds like maybe the mayor is.
For some reason, I'm not. So what I'm going to do is leave the Zoom and then come back real quick.
Okay.
It's a black screen, and I've tried everything I can think of to make it not be a black screen. So I'm just going to go out and come back. Sorry.
Okay. Should I keep going, or should we wait? Keep going? Okay, he's seen this. So. Okay, so we've awarded 42%. We're tracking toward 57% of our funds, and we're tracking towards 57% of our total production goal, with 461 units underway. And this includes 201 30% AMI units, bringing us to 60% of our total production goal, and 292 family size units, which gets us to 73% of our production goal. We're currently at about 16% of our 60 to 80% AMI threshold, but we anticipate supporting more of these units within our Hillside Park project and in partnership with first-time home buyer programs. Next slide, please. So this is the Housing Authority's development pipeline. The blue shaded projects have already or are likely to utilize Metro bond funding. And as you can see, we have a lot of affordable units underway throughout the county in all stages of development. So Rosewood Station in unincorporated Clackamas County, it consisted of 212 units and was completed last summer. Clayton Moore Commons in Oregon City is a 24-unit development dedicated to veterans and their families, and that was completed in 2020. Hillside Manor, the 100-unit renovation project, was completed last September. Our pilot project, Webster Road, this is a 48-unit permanent supportive housing development, is scheduled to open in July. We have Fuller Road Station in unincorporated Clackamas County, right by the MAX station. That's a 100-unit transit-oriented development project slated to open in August. And then we have Maple Apartments in Oregon City. This is 171 units scheduled to start construction in May. And Good Shepherd Village in Happy Valley, 143 units slated to start construction next month. We have Merrillhurst Commons in Lake Oswego. That's 100 units of family housing scheduled to start construction this summer. And Malala Apartments in Malala, that's 60 units, also slated to start construction this summer. And the remaining projects are in early stages of development, but Boone's Ferry and Hillside Park have recently made significant progress in terms of land use and the rezoning needed to support the housing developments. And again, I've already touched on the second NOFA, which we plan to release this summer. And before I pass it to Vahid, are there any questions on the bond or development side? Seeing none, so I will pass it on to Vahid.
Thanks, Devin. Good evening, councilors and city staff. I'm Vahid Brown, the Supportive Housing Services Program Manager with the Housing Authority of Clackamas County. Next slide. Yeah, I'm just going to give an update on the Supportive Housing Services Program and where we're at in implementation. I see the mayor has rejoined us. Are you able to see the presentation now?
I can see. For some reason, my video won't start. Don't know what's going on with Zoom tonight.
Well, you can see us and we can't see you now. Okay, well. Yeah. The Supportive Housing Services Program, as I'm sure the council is well aware, is a tax-based new revenue source for supportive housing homeless services in the region, passed by voters in the metro region in May 2020. It's an income tax on higher earning households and on businesses that make more than a certain amount of gross receipts in the region. Like with the bond, Clackamas County receives 21.3% of the revenue. In the current fiscal year, the projected revenue that would come to us at that percent is about 32 million. And that's kind of the most recent projection for how much the revenue that these taxes will generate for Clackamas County. For comparison purposes, all combined sources of funds to support homeless services in the county before this measure was passed, by which I mean federal funding, state funding, and general fund from the county, amounted to about $8 million a year to support programs for people experiencing homelessness. So we're going from a baseline of about 8 million to an additional 32 million. So it's a quite significant expansion in scale in our capacity to provide services to folks experiencing homelessness. Our local implementation plan, which will guide the implementation of the program for the next 10 years, was developed in the spring of 2021. It's been passed by our board and Metro. It's online. It guides our work and has established the priorities that will guide us moving forward. Disbursements from the measure tax began in July 2021, and our program implementation is being supported by revenue collected from the measure. That's most of which is expected to be distributed at the end of the fiscal year when when high-income households, will file their taxes. So our implementation has been supported by $5 million in advance from Metro up to date. Next slide. So the Supportive Housing Services funds, the measure was designed to really end chronic homelessness in our region. And so the funds are quite flexible. They can be used for anything and everything necessary to move folks from homelessness, with an emphasis on folks experiencing long-term homelessness, into permanent housing, and provide a wide array of supportive services that might be needed by households with long histories of homelessness and disabilities to maintain long-term successful housing. Our goals and investments in our plan are kind of structured around these 6 types of service intervention, but the supportive services dollars are, as I said, quite flexible, so they can be used for things not listed here. But supportive housing services is itself a very broad term, and that just describes the menu, very large menu of support that households might need or require to be successful in their housing. That could be, and it includes direct one-on-one case management, connection to behavioral health services, or the direct provision of behavioral health services, the provision of in-home health care, employment services. So all kinds of things are included in supportive housing services. We've also launched a new voucher program as part of this fund, the Regional Long-Term Rent Assistance Program. All 3 counties are participating in this local voucher program. We call it ARLA. That's not the most elegant, one word condensation of an acronym, but I don't know how to say RLA, so we say ARLA. We also support short-term rent assistance provision, housing navigation and placement services, which is case managers that work directly with folks experiencing homelessness who are in shelter, who receive rent assistance in finding a unit on the open market and getting a lease signed, eviction prevention services, and shelter and transitional housing. And that's the only area where the Supportive Housing Services Program can be used as a source of capital funds. We can use supportive housing services to buy or build shelter. Next slide. As I said, the measure and the program has a focus on ending chronic homelessness in our region. So at the initiation of the program, and until Metro Council decides to change these proportions, which they could in the future, 75% of the funds from the measure must go to supporting the most vulnerable households experiencing homelessness, people with long histories of homelessness, who are very low income, earn less than 30% of area median income, and who have 1 or more disabling conditions. And those are defined by the measure as population A. So our focus in implementation now is on reaching folks otherwise referred to by HUD as chronically homeless. And then 25% of the funds now can be used for to support folks who are experiencing or are at risk of experiencing homelessness. And as the region, makes strides or progress on housing long-term houseless folks with disabling conditions, these proportions might change in the future. Population B in these terms is actually much larger as a community of people in our region than population A, but the measure is starting with the folks who are at most at risk and have been without housing for the longest period of time. Next slide. Our local implementation plan, as I said, establishes the priorities and kind of guiding principles that are working to shape our implementation and how we're contracting services and so forth. So this is the plan's investment priorities for phase 1, which we define in the plan as the first couple of years of implementation. This is based on a lot of community engagement over a 6-month period with folks all throughout Clackamas County representing different sectors, and as well as with focused engagement with communities of color that was supported by partnerships with Unite Oregon and the Coalition of Communities of Color, both of which assisted us in reaching the communities of color to shape our plan. So increasing shelter capacity. Clackamas County has historically lacked year-round shelter for single adults experiencing homelessness. We have some shelter for veterans, for families, and for folks fleeing domestic violence, but Clackamas County has not had year-round shelter for single adults. We've also historically lacked culturally specific services. We have some very small culturally specific service providers, very few in the housing and homeless services space. And so another priority of our plan was to expand culturally specific services in the county, expand wraparound services of all types. That's kind of the supportive services category that I mentioned. Increase outreach and housing placement services. We were also kind of directed by our community to identify existing high-performing programs that are serving population A and expand those. Focus on vouchers and housing supports that were time limited. In other words, for example, a one-year investment from Kaiser, which supported the Metro 300 housing program in the region, which was 1 year of rent assistance for older adults experiencing homelessness. So identifying programs like that had limited terms of support and converting those limited housing supports into long-term vouchers. Increasing internal capacity. This is a lot of administration and coordination work. So we're trying to build our team and allocating funds for outreach. Outreach appears on this list twice, but it was identified, I think, as a really significant gap in the county, as well as shelter and culturally specific services. Next slide. And also in general terms, the plan, the local implementation plan, identifies kind of areas of prioritized activities, things that we're intending, either we've already moved into funding and making progress on these things, or are part of our year one goals and objectives, or in some cases, like the first bullet, will define and guide our programs throughout the history, throughout the life of the measure and our program. So designing and evaluate programs with a racial equity lens. This measure and the program has a central focus on advancing racial equity. The plan dealt quite extensively with disparities in our service system, disparities in housing outcomes, and the experiences of accessing our programs and services by communities of color, with an eye towards designing strategies to remove those barriers and address those disparities. So all of our program evaluation, all of our outcomes and data collection and so forth are done with an eye towards advancing racial equity. Building supportive housing capacity. So we have lacked in Clackamas County permanent supportive housing resources. There's a statistic I've often shared in the last couple of years that before this measure came online, with the existing capacity of permanent supportive housing in Clackamas County, and looking at the 2019 wait lists of people who were waiting on lists for access to permanent supportive housing, it would have taken us 22 years to move through the 2019 wait list, adding no one else to that wait list. To move them into permanent supportive housing would have taken us 22 years. So our first order of business in implementing the program is to really dramatically expand our permanent supportive housing resources in the county, which is a combination of long-term rent assistance, whether that's tenant-based or project-based, and supportive services or supportive housing case management. Again, ensure another of our prioritized activities is ensuring participants in time-limited voucher programs and time-limited shelter programs transition to permanent supportive housing. That was the focus, as I'll mention, of the first quarter of implementation. Stabilizing the existing shelter programs in our system, building internal capacity, again, and investing in regional efforts alongside Washington and Multnomah County. Next slide. So we started implementing programs at the beginning of the fiscal year in July. As I mentioned, the initial focus in quarter one was on kind of stabilizing programs that were about to either be shut down because of an ending of one-time COVID-related funding, which was true of the motel hotel emergency shelter program. This was a very significant expansion of shelter capacity in Clackamas County. It's been running almost 2 years now, and this is non-congregate motel room-based shelter for very vulnerable folks experiencing homelessness who, because of health concerns, age, and other things, were at risk of severe illness if they were to contract COVID-19. At its maximum scope, there was over 125 rooms enrolled in this program, hotel rooms. And that was going to be wound down or closed down at the beginning of the fiscal year because of the ending of the of a certain state state of emergency and a loss of the FEMA commitment to match funding for that. So we committed supportive housing services funds to maintain that shelter program until such time as we could move all households in those motel rooms into permanent housing. That has since been covered with ARPA funds that were committed by the Board of County Commissioners in November. That's the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA. But there were also two transitional housing programs, Serenity and Haven House, which serve folks exiting incarceration who would be exiting to homelessness and have severe and persistent mental illness. And so those two programs had lost their funding. They had lost their state funding some years ago, and they were kind of kept limping with some general fund that was committed here and there, but that had come to an end. And so we stabilized those two programs with supportive housing services. So that was the first order of business once we sort of kicked off in the beginning of the fiscal year. And then we moved into developing or setting the framework to launch our regional long-term rent assistance, our ARLA program, and the contracted services to kind of stand up a collaborative of case management services provided by the 5 agencies listed on this slide. 2 of these 5 agencies are culturally specific agencies, both of which are new to Clackamas County in providing housing services, Greater New Hope Family Services and El Programa Hispano Católico. So that in itself is a pretty great leap forward for Clackamas County in the availability of culturally specific housing services. But these 5 agencies are working with us on both housing navigation and placement, so working with folks who are in shelter in the motel shelter program or who are experiencing unsheltered homelessness, and working with them to find an apartment that is that will be paid for through the ARLA program, and then also providing supportive services for the long term to the households that are receiving the rent assistance. The 5 contracts and the initiation of ARLA and the pace that we're on, we will exceed our year 1 goals for households who are receiving supportive services. And in other words, our sort of PSH, permanent supportive housing. Our goal was to have 200 units or 200 households in permanent supportive housing in year 1. And we're going to, just at the current contracted capacity, we're looking at 205 and hopefully more. So that's great news. In a typical year, the turnover rate into permanent supportive housing resources in the county that existed previously was between 5 and 12. So we're going from the ability to move between 5 and 12 households into permanent supportive housing in a typical year to moving 205 households into permanent supportive housing in year 1 of this program. So it's kind of a big deal. It's having a big impact on some of the most vulnerable people that live in our community. I think that's my last slide. Is there another slide? Oh, there is another slide. Next steps. Another cool thing that's brand new is this Tri-County Request for Programmatic Qualifications, or RFPQ. And that's kind of a lingo-y thing. I mean, it's just a procurement. Basically, we're working together, Washington, Clackamas, and Multnomah County, for the first time to do a joint procurement for homeless services. And so we've got this procurement that closed yesterday. It was open for 2 months, and it will establish a qualified pool of vendors for all of the things, all the kinds of services that we can provide with this fund. All of our vendors who do this work, or who want to do this work, or who do work with communities of color but want to work in homeless services as well, a wide array of agencies are going to be qualified as vendors, and then the 3 counties can directly contract with them to provide services. So that's exciting. It just ended yesterday. We'll have our qualified pool established by March 7th. And then in Clackamas County, we'll move immediately into program offers, like another kind of the next step of these procurements, basically saying, we've got so much money available for outreach. These 27 agencies were qualified in the pool. Please give us your best ideas for outreach in Clackamas County, and we will fund you. So that's the new and expanded services coming in the 3rd and 4th quarter of this fiscal year. Once that RFPQ is scored and our qualified vendor pool is established. that we will be moving into new contracts with new providers, potentially some expansion of our existing contracts. The local implementation plans, these were built with extensive community engagement, 6 months of work to build the plan. So year by year, we won't be doing another local implementation plan or a reset, but we'll be doing annual work plans and presenting those to the Regional Oversight Committee of the Supportive Services Program and Metro. So we're working now, my team, on the development of the next year's work plan. And this is kind of a high level, it's a level down from the broad priorities established in the local implementation plan to the goals and investments that we're saying we're intending to make in the next fiscal year. So that will be completed in April. We also have quarterly reports that we provide to our board and to the Regional Oversight Committee and Metro. Just presented on Q1 with the Metro Regional Oversight Committee yesterday. And my team has completed the second quarter report that will now kind of wind its way through the bureaucracies in the next few weeks and months. But there's a lot of reporting and oversight provided by Metro and the Regional Oversight Committee. So plenty of opportunities to share outcomes with you all, and happy to do so anytime. But that's my spiel, and turn it back to the council for questions, if there are any.
Kathy, go ahead.
Sure. Thanks, Fahid. I was really appreciating you providing the context and comparing the sort of before and after effects in Clackamas County, because I think that that's really invisible to a lot of folks. And it is, I don't have the words for how exciting it is to hear the difference that this is really going to make in our communities. I know that this is something that folks in Milwaukie have a lot of interest in and care a lot about. So I'm wondering if, and I know this is kind of shot in the dark, but if you could maybe, for people who are not policy geeks like all of us, provide some understanding of what this means in Milwaukie. What might people notice about the work that you all are going to be able to do with this funding bump?
Yeah, thank you. That is, Milwaukie has typically been the number 2 or 1 or 3. It's always in the top 3 of in our counts of folks experiencing homelessness in the county. Milwaukie feels this crisis of housing unaffordability as acutely or more acutely than any other community in the county. So Oregon City, Milwaukie, and the unincorporated part of the county that's North Clackamas kind of change position between 1 and 3 year by year. So yes, it's a big, as you know, folks that are living in Milwaukie are seeing unsheltered homelessness in your community, on the trolley trail, downtown, folks living in their cars. Over the years, we've seen entire buildings be, change hands from one property management company or owner to another, and the rents of an entire building of apartments in Milwaukie being raised 120% or something like that in a space of months. So there are pressures that Milwaukie feels as acutely as any other community in the county on the housing affordability and stability for working people in this community, and for people with disabilities, people with very low incomes. And so that has been an emergency and a crisis in Milwaukie. But the resources to be able to move folks who are very vulnerable, who are living on the sidewalk or in a van in Milwaukie into permanent housing, where, it's an order of magnitude in scale, right? And so having to scramble all of the networks and advocates and available volunteers and resources to move one elderly person in a wheelchair, or one family in a van into housing. That's in the 5 years before this measure, when I'm working with Clackamas County, that's a slow process, and it's very vivid in my mind. These households, one at a time, sometimes weeks and months apart. That's not what we're seeing now. Now we're seeing, I'm getting texts and messages from friends that I've known for a long time who've been experiencing homelessness in the county. I got my keys. Here's a picture of my fireplace. Here's me and my partner in the kitchen making spaghetti. It's amazing, and it's happening now. That pace is not going to slow down. We're only going to continue to expand the pipeline, so people will see a difference.
Lisa, go ahead.
I could see this conversation going on for hours. We probably needed you in a time slot with more time. But I guess one thing you said about there not being any, I wanted to get a little more clarity on. You said there were not really any shelter beds in Clackamas apart from, sort of veterans, families, and domestic violence victims. And now there's this hotel-based program, but it sounded like that's just transitional. I guess I was curious about that because I remember in 2020 there was a proposal to buy a hotel nearby on McLaughlin, and then I think the county commissioners ended up not doing that, as I recall. So can you kind of talk a little bit more about the hotel piece of it and the sort of interim shelter piece of it?
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Beatty. That's correct. That's all right. The motel shelter program that was stood up under COVID with FEMA support from FEMA was not meant to be a permanent expansion of our shelter capacity in the county at the time that was stood up. So, and as I said, the FEMA support and funding that made that motel shelter possible was wound down at the end of the last fiscal year. So we decided to continue to invest in that with supportive housing services dollars and subsequently with ARPA dollars, with the support of the board, with the understanding that we would be sort of closing down motel shelter beds, as it were, as we moved households out of a motel room. So if there was 121 rooms at one time, as we're connecting people with long-term rent assistance and case management and moving them out of a room into a permanent home, the hotel room that we used to be paying for the last several years under COVID, we're now kind of letting go back to the market as a hotel room. So it's a temporary sort of capacity that is not really taking in more folks, new folks experiencing homelessness into it. As we move people out of the motel program into permanent housing, we're sort of progressively closing down those as shelter units. The Board of Commissioners is discussing kind of what to do next in terms of motel shelter and non-congregate shelter. They had a policy session about this last week. There is some interest in revisiting the idea of buying a motel or another property that could be used for shelter permanently and not as on a temporary basis. And so staff right now are working to kind of respond to the commissioner's request from the last policy session to sort of see what the appetite is moving forward. But be that as it may, that's kind of the politics in the larger conversation. That there was an opportunity with state funds to buy a motel called Project Turnkey that was not ultimately successful in Clackamas County. We did not end up buying a motel. But the supportive housing services program, as I mentioned, the funds can be used as capital funds for shelter. And we do have in our plan a goal of bringing online 65 shelter beds in phase one, permanent, using supportive housing services dollars. And that remains a commitment, that remains a part of the plan. Those dollars can still be dedicated to that, regardless of the outcome of this conversation about, is Turnkey going to come back? Does the county want to buy one of these motels? How long are we going to continue to contract rooms? So that's somewhat of a complicated answer. I'm sorry if I.
No, that was very helpful. And I guess I just want to understand as a practical matter, when your ultimate goal is to get someone into permanent housing, I would think, but I don't work in this field, I would think that that's easier from having them in a shelter than from trying to keep track of them on the street or whatever. Is that true?
That's right. Yes, that is correct. Yep. We have really excellent folks in our partner programs like Central City Concern, who do fantastic work housing people directly from unsheltered homelessness. But it is difficult, right? There are challenges and barriers, and it's just not as safe for a household to be working with a caseworker while living in a tent in the woods, as opposed to in a motel room where they can have access to hygiene facilities and a door you can lock. I mean, just stating the obvious, but and that's been the status quo for many, many years in Clackamas County. When we've been housing people experiencing homelessness, we're working with them unsheltered until we can get them housed, with the exception of some of those other programs like the Veterans Village and Clackamas Women's Services and so forth. So the board, I think, is hearing that is a critical component in a successful pipeline or a continuum of moving folks who are very vulnerable with challenging barriers to housing because of trauma and many years of homelessness into housing. That continuum is more successful when we have access to safety off the streets for people. And so that is absolutely something that we want to maintain our ability to move people into a safe place, work with them, get your ID back, get the DD 214 from the Defense Department, whatever it is we need to do that's been the barrier to you getting into an apartment in the past. It's easier to do that work and get those things done and accomplished when we have, we know where the household is because they're not being moved around, and yeah.
So Vahid, and I'm sorry we're really running late. This is absolutely something that we could have spent an entire 2-hour work session on. A quick question about mental health professionals. Is there going to be any opportunity to disperse some of that, i.e. have embedded mental health professionals in PDs or at libraries or in some way that somebody doesn't have to, there's a couple of aspects to that, right? But it seems like it would be really beneficial to have that not just at Red Soils.
Yeah, absolutely, Mayor. And that is something that is in our plan, kind of the expansion of behavioral health resources with the housing and homeless services nexus or specificity. We are working with health centers at H3S to fund a couple of sort of as a pilot program, a couple of housing navigators who are connected to the behavioral health clinics of the county, so that they're folks who have a client caseload as mental health professionals, but are also housing navigators. So they would, if they're a client, they would be focusing on folks experiencing homelessness, providing health services to clients while at the same time helping them find a place to live and connecting them with long-term rent assistance, just as one example. But we've also heard, and it's in our plan, that the community needs behavioral health professionals as part of our outreach, to people experiencing homelessness in the community. We already do that with Central City Concern. We have clinical professionals who are part of the LEAD program, but it's not enough, right? We need to expand that. And we're working with HealthShare which is moving into a pilot with a Medicaid waiver that has been many years going through the state process, but is now kind of done. There is a Medicaid waiver that has been completed for Oregon that will allow HealthShare to pay for housing services with Medicare, with Medicaid. And so we're working with them on how we partner and kind of make our system of care coordinated. And that's just great news. That means there's lots of new resources that can be part of our work in housing people. But yes, that is, I think that the two things we heard most from the community about, like, what are the gaps? What do we need to shore up? We heard there's not enough shelter, behavioral health. So those are just over and over and over again. I mean, also culturally specific services. This was a huge barrier as well.
Right. Well, and the way it works right now is our PD tends to be that service. And, they're great guys. We have an awesome police force, but it's not what they're trained to do. It's not their job. They don't have necessarily access to all the things somebody coming from your team would have. And just trying to look for ways that we can embed somebody with those skill sets and those resources more around the community. All right. Well, if there are no further questions, I think we should be. This needs to be continued. There's a lot more we could be talking about, and maybe we do it offline. So we are going to move the executive session that was scheduled for tonight. But thank you both very much. I have 100 more questions, but clearly that's not going to happen.
Yeah, thank you.
Great presentations, and I look forward to working with both of you soon. In any case, we are moving our executive session to the next meeting, counselors. So we'll conclude our work session. You have all of 10 minutes to try and eat something before the regular session begins. Thank you. Hopefully Zoom will work for me when we get back.